So being at home this last month or so with self-quarantine, you find yourself watching things you would never watch on a normal basis. And today we're talking about the Netflix original animated show, The Midnight Gospel. Easily one of the most unique and interesting shows I've ever watched on Netflix. We're talking about that and much more. Clancy, a spacecaster with a malfunctioning multiverse simulator who leaves the comfort of his own home to interview beings living in dying worlds. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot here with a brand new Netflix original TV review for The Midnight Gospel, a show that I had no idea was a thing until yesterday. We're talking about it in this non-spoiler review. Before we dive into it, as you all can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my social media accounts. If you're new to this channel, definitely subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss any of my new movie reviews, TV reviews, and live streams. Also, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Really helps out the channel, but also really appreciate it. And if and when you've seen The Midnight Gospel, let me know if you were under the influence, if you were sober like I was. Let me know your thoughts on the show as a whole. Let's have some fun discussions down there. So full disclaimer, I was not under the influence while watching this show. I haven't watched any of the creators' original work, which comes from Pendleton Ward. Wasn't familiar with Duncan Trussell. This was a brand new experience for me. So this is coming from a perspective from someone that doesn't watch a lot of animated shows like this in this capacity, like Adventure Time and things like that. So this is the perspective that I want to give you guys in this review. And again, non-spoilers. So again, I had no idea this was a show. I was just, again, when you're self-quarantined, I've been finding myself streaming or watching through Netflix, Hulu. There's things I've never heard of and seen before, which is, I guess that's kind of a silver lining in this time that we're in, is you kind of discover new things and you might find new hobbies and things of that nature. So I pressed play, guys, and I have to tell you, this was easily one of the most unique experiences I've ever had with not only any show on Netflix, but just a show in general. This was so psychedelic, so mind-bending at times. The best part of this show for me, easily hands down, besides the great animation and some funny moments, were the conversations that were being had. I'm going to give you guys slightly kind of a ranking probably towards the end of this video in regards to my favorite episodes, but starting off with the positives, these conversations about life, death, meditation, good drugs versus bad drugs, again, romance, love, heartbreak, one of the most touching, heartwarming episodes of any animated show I've ever seen in episode 8 with Clancy, our main character, and his mom. I mean, literally, guys, the conversations were so fascinating. Not gonna lie, there were times where I wasn't really necessarily paying attention to what was going on the screen. I was literally listening to the conversations being had, which is kind of the unique thing about this show and this format. You have Duncan Trussell, who has his own podcast, and I'm gonna have to find this podcast, listen to some of these more interesting conversations, but the way the show kind of presents itself, as I had read in Synopsis, you have Clancy, who has a multiverse simulator. He's going to these different worlds that are dying. And the conversations he's having with these beings on these earths are just so interesting, and conversations I have with myself all the time. Again, we talked about it recently with Devs, the conversation about life and death and preparing yourself for death and accepting the ultimate end game of our lives, which is death. So, I mean, it's just so many fascinating things that the show kind of brings to you. And again, yeah, there's trippy animation that I thought was gorgeous at times. Some animation that really didn't work for me as a whole, even though the animation was consistent throughout the entire 8 episodes, but there were different worlds that we were going to and different, looking animations. So for the most part, guys, the biggest thing I took away from this was just how connected and how fascinated I was by these conversations being had. In regards to some of my favorite episodes, I got to start off with episode 1, The Taste of the King, which is, you meet Clancy, and again, I just love how the simulator that he's going in is essentially woman's particular body part, which I thought was a fascinating concept within itself in regards to it's where life begins, and he's looking for answers through this. I thought that was great, but you meet Clancy right off the bat. He's such a fascinating character, such an interesting character. He has his ups and his lows. He has his moments where he's coming to grips with him as a person, as well as the grips of things that are surrounding him in his personal life. I just love the character. I thought Clancy was just such a fascinating character, but episode 1 was a really great conversation about good drugs and bad drugs, about being a zombie, what it's like to be a zombie. I thought that episode was great. Some other episodes that stood out to me were definitely Annihilation of Joy. I thought that was such a fascinating episode with the prisoner and kind of live, die, repeat concept, and just what that did to that particular character. That was probably the most, like, visually speaking, I was so invested in that particular story, because again, you're listening to these conversations, but you're also watching a scripted thing happen within the actual episode. That was one of my favorites, but easily my favorite episode is the last episode, Mouse of Silver, which is a conversation, again, we're not giving too much to the episodes, a conversation that Clancy, Duncan, has with his real life mother, who's dealing with some personal things and some particular things going on with her life. And I just thought that was such a great conversation, and just, again, talking about death and preparing yourself for death and the inevitability of death and how we handle it. Such a fascinating episode, guys. In regards to any negatives or criticism I have with the show, again, sometimes the visual stuff on the screen wasn't that appealing in regards to the scripted aspect of the show. Not all the jokes landed, which is fine, but I would say some of the animation really didn't work for me as a whole, because it kind of took me out of what was going on. But again, the conversations were consistent. There were some episodes here and there that I was kind of checking in and out in regards to, not only was I not connected to what was going on the screen, but also some of the conversations just didn't really hit for me in regards to what they were talking about in that particular episode. But those are just some minor things. I was very, very impressed by this show in regards to how I was engaged. Again, I wasn't under the influence, and I can only imagine what that's like if you were under the influence, and I would love to know your thoughts if you celebrated 420 while watching the show on its premiere date. Let me know your thoughts on that. But again, this show is psychedelic. It is interesting. It is thought-provoking. It is, gorgeous at times when it comes to animation, but really the biggest thing for me was the conversations that were being had, and I'm very fascinated to look into more of Duncan's conversations and find his podcast and see what else he has to offer. And I'm interested to see what comes of this show. I don't know if this is, I believe the creator, Ward, has a deal with Netflix where he's going to do other animated shows. I don't know if it'll be attached to this world, but really interested in finding out more about these creators. So I was pretty impressed by this. So overall, guys, I recommend you all check it out. Again, I recommend you check it out under the influence, maybe, and maybe not so you can see if those conversations continue to hold up. But I'm going to definitely check out some of these episodes again, because there were some really interesting conversations that I have all the time. So I recommend you all check out The Midnight Gospel. And when you do, let me know what you thought of it. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss any of my new content. A lot of cool things happening this week. Movies that I missed out on that I'm continuing to do that series. We got stuff on Netflix this week. And then the big thing for Saturday and Sunday, huge YouTube live watch along for Avengers Infinity War on Saturday and Avengers Endgame on Sunday. Got some special guests. Really excited for that. So definitely keep an eye out for those videos, guys. Thank you all for watching this review, and we'll see you soon.